Thank you very much. Since President Cumming first contacted me about the possibilities of making a presentation at this meeting, I've been thinking anew about differences, real or perceived differences, between musicology and ethnomusicology. Each year, there are increasingly interesting overlaps, I think, and more frequent exchanges between scholars. I'm sure you're aware of that. But in general, our methods and foci differ somewhat. You rely more on a broad range of historical sources, people, libraries, collections of recordings, etc. And often you sing or play the music you study. While ethnomusicologists also use archives, we regard field research as central. And we too often sing or play music we study, but only if appropriate in the eyes and ears of our community interlocutors. Today, I want to focus on different ways that communities I've come to know tell their own history, or alternatively, protect or limit that telling. How do culturally diverse individuals perceive, speak about, sing about, or dance a longer now? How do community friendships impact the telling of history within and beyond the community of origin? What do outsiders learn about what is lost, remembered, revived, or reinvented? My memories raise questions about the best practices for sharing knowledge, protecting it, and giving back. I will start by reflecting on my early fieldwork as a graduate student, trying to appropriately study traditional music in an Inuit community named Pelly Bay in Canada's far north in the 1970s. Like many places in Canada's north, Inuit renamed the community in their own language. It became Kugaruk in 1999. Second, I will consider technology's role in uncovering a hidden history about the Beothuk people, the original people of Newfoundland, the island where I have lived for the last 25 years. It raises interesting questions about how and why some histories are suppressed. Finally, I will share my admiration for a remarkable Haudenosaunee musician and cultural leader, Sadie Buck. 30 years ago, she and I both taught at York University. I attended her classes whenever possible. So first of all, early fieldwork, Inuit music in Kugaruk, Canada. The map you saw a moment ago that I should have left here. Okay. On this map of northern Canada, I've circled two of the places where I did research in the 1970s. Today, when I think about Arctic Canada, I have many concerns about resource extraction. 50 years ago, I was concerned about stereotypes in the literature on Inuit culture in Canada's far north. Good sources did exist, almost all by people who had some Inuit ancestry, as did Knud Rasmussen, and also people who had deep personal connections to the land. The best sources on early 20th century decades were written by Rasmussen, who had Danish and Greenlandic ancestry. His mother was an Inuk, and his command of both Greenlandic and the related Inuit language prepared him well to visit Inuit in Canada's north. While music is often mentioned in the fulsome reports of the 5th Thule expedition that he published, there is little detail. His work was prior to the advent of portable recording technologies, and had they been available, travel by dog sled was probably too rugged for transporting delicate technologies. 50 years later, in the 1970s, I met some of the relatives of some of the individuals who had assisted Rasmussen. This photo shows two of them. The woman on the left is Helene Karmatsiak. Rasmussen was assisted by her father and her grandfather, but the child Helene is well mentioned as well in Rasmussen's writing. To my delight, she still knew the songs of her father and grandfather. One composed by her grandfather around the turn of the 20th century describes the hard work of living on the land in the far north and the sense of frailty that produces. I suspect her grandfather was not frail at all. I had wanted to play that song for you. My copy or my recording of it is in the Canadian Museum of History, But when I went on their site, although they make a lot of their collections available, the particular programs they've used for making those available were not compatible with my computer. So I can't play that one for you. Sorry. Inuit, I came to know, were generous in sharing stories and songs. Their drum dance songs reveal respect for wildlife. A caribou, for instance, was valued prey that would feed a family for many days, but caribou were rarely named in songs out of respect, but also to show the modesty of the hunter. The song that Hélène sang for me does name caribou, perhaps asserting her status as a leader. Small animals such as lemmings were often referenced in song texts. I suspect that they are modest substitutions for caribou. Another song that records community history was composed by Bernard Croatock about the arrival of the first airplane that landed in the community, probably around 1950. The composer said it was a frightening experience initially. He told me that his song depicts the plane as if it was a big bird. He mimicked the landing of that bird vocally by touching a low note in one phrase and then springing up to slightly higher pitches, only to land on the low note more decisively in the final phrase. Women in Kugaruk had their own repertoire of improvised vocal games, more often played with sonic exchanges rather than storytelling. I'll play you a little bit of this one. Of course, with radio and TV in most homes by the end of the 70s, drum dances became less frequent. More recently, however, Indigenous music awards for traditional songs have prompted continuity or revival of some of the earlier styles and repertoires. And as many of you will know, whenever there is an event with invited dignitaries, especially in Ottawa, Canada's capital, there are always Indigenous and often Inuit performances. And of course, the recording industry has found new markets with Indigenous recordings and videos. I'd like to turn in the second part of this talk to technology's role in uncovering hidden Indigenous cultural histories. And I'll play for you in a moment a Beothuk song. Here's the transcript of that song. We are probably each aware of histories that have been misconstrued or denied. 1513.9. There's the archive identification, and here's the song. We are probably each aware of histories that have misconstrued or denied. A Mi'kmaq chief has claimed that his people were encouraged to settle on the island to destroy the Beothuk. He doesn't claim that his people tried to do that, however. Native Studies professor Maura Hanrahan, in a work that she published in 2018, has critiqued history that claims Beothuk continuity beyond the 19th century. She regards such assertions as a romanticization of their history that, quote, squeezes potential room offered to the surviving Indigenous peoples, end quote. Potential room. In other words, she thinks that claims of evidence about Beothuk history threatened the legitimacy of the Mi'kmaq in Newfoundland, who used the waters around the island and settled there somewhat later. You've heard, however, a rare recording that was made in 1910 by Frank Speck at the campsite of a Beothuk/Mi'kmaq woman named Santu Tony. There she is. I think it challenges a history denied. In addition, there is more recent evidence that Beothuk not only married Mi'kmaq, as in Santu's family, but are closely related to Innu people in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. So what kind of evidence is a song? The singer, Santu Tony, was born in Newfoundland to a Mi'kmaq father and a Beothuk mother. She would live most of her life, however, in Nova Scotia. The song, which you've just heard, the song moves through several musical styles that seem to reflect diverse intercultural contact during her lifetime. I'm going to turn this back a sec. I recognize the style of a Christian hymn at one point, marked by the yellow marker there, rather casually, I'll have to say. So the Christian hymn starts at the yellow point, but lengthy phrases notably are part of some of the other sections. And the last two phrases, beyond the second red marking, resemble a lot some of the Mi'kmaq songs that repeat lines of text. And the last four lines of this from the red mark on, do, 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 it starts with just vocables, but you can see some of the repetition there if you look closely. There's Santu again, and there's the book in which there's some information about Beothuk history. In the next section, I would like to start to look at new initiatives led particularly by Haudenosaunee musician Sadie Buck. If you're not familiar with the word Haudenosaunee, it's the local word used for what often has been described in the literature as Iroquois. So new initiatives in the late 20th and early 21st century. Within Indigenous communities, many skilled female musicians continued to change the music landscape, and within universities, more attention to the gendering of music cultures emerged, as you know very well. As mentioned at the outset of this presentation, I want to return to the work of Sadie Buck, a remarkable Haudenosaunee woman, a remarkable musician and leader of the Ontario-based Six Nations women singers. Her thriving Haudenosaunee or Iroquois people, as they're also known, their community lived near where I grew up in Ontario and not too far from where I taught at York University for some years. During a year when Sadie also taught at York U, we met up often to chat and have lunch together. I sat in on some of her classes in which listening was not simply sitting at a desk. Sadie always got the class up dancing and singing responses to her lead at the end of each class. Dancing was usually clockwise in a circle, but Sadie would sometimes create a second circle that danced counterclockwise, or we might simply change direction. At one point, I asked her if the directions had some meaning. She replied immediately that counterclockwise was the direction of those who had passed away. We were acknowledging their history and their presence. Sadie also created history and news through a program at the Banff Centre for the Arts in Alberta. She established in 1996 a program for female Indigenous musicians. An objective was to encourage Indigenous women to share their music publicly, and they did this in part with the CD that you see here, Hearts of the Nations. The 12 Indigenous women she invited to participate from across the Americas ranged from quite young girls to grandmothers. They ranged in experience, but meeting together built confidence. They were serious about their art, but also had a lot of fun. The annual objective to create and produce a recording with tracks composed by each of the women inspired a surge of energy and attention to their creative skills. And I've already mentioned that they produced Hearts of the Nations, featuring new compositions by each musician. Both the skill and the fun are audible in some of the pieces, such as Moon of the Singing Frogs or the Bone Game song, excuse me, or their own version of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. I think I have the last one queued up here. I'll play a little bit of it. The importance of thinking across different generations was also clear when Sadie wrote an opera entitled Bones, an Aboriginal dance opera, conceived and directed by Sadie and Alejandro Ronceria. Bones debuted in 2001 as one of a series of Indigenous programs at the Banff Centre for the Arts in Alberta. It always interests me to see what liner notes choose to emphasize, and in this case, the CD liner notes tell us that Bones is a deeply spiritual work. It begins with the earth chant as life and knowledge transfer from earth to the human body. The singers and dancers explore the people's journey on the earth, the return of our bones to the earth, and the return of our spirits to the stars. The plot unfolded as a communication among actors playing out contemporary events on the bottom here, and other actors playing their ancestors. The ancestors commented from a higher level position at one side of the stage, as you also see on this slide. In short, history is visibly as well as audibly present in Sadie's creative work and performances. In conclusion, ways of representing history. These stories offer a representation of cultures that are remembered, revived, or reinvented. My focus was primarily on women whose music history is too often overlooked or not celebrated. You heard about Hélène Carmaziak, Santu Toni, and Sadie Buck, each of whom kept the memory of traditions alive, but also changed or challenged traditions at times. In the more recent work of Sadie Buck, the powerful connection between tradition and innovation is particularly evident in collaboration with other women, genre overlaps, and new inventions. Such a range of initiatives demonstrates how individuals and communities create both personal identity and their people's history through music. And I thank you for listening to me.